Thank you so much for joining the Civic Patriot. Today I am with Adrian Perkins. Adrian Perkins is the former mayor of Shreveport, Louisiana, where he inherited a $1.2 million deficit and only a year after taking office confronted the COVID-19 pandemic. Quite a honeymoon you had, Mayor Perkins.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Mayor Perkins made a series of tough choices to minimize the impact of the pandemic on Black and minority communities and left the city after it was all said and done with a $55 million surplus in just 3 years. Mayor Perkins is an Army veteran, graduate of West Point, and a graduate of Harvard Law School. He also was a fellow at the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics in 2023. Now he is a senior vice president at Prospect Park, a merchant bank and financial advisory firm focused on the national security sector. Mayor Perkins, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
You're a Democrat, and as was most statewide public figures in Louisiana until about a generation ago, Bill Clinton won Louisiana twice. Now Dems don't have a shot in Louisiana. What happened, and what does a realistic path to competitiveness look like in Louisiana and other deep South states?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can kind of track the changing tide all the way back to the Lyndon B. Johnson comment where he says, I think we've lost the South for a generation. That's when you start to see numbers turn in the South. And obviously, Bill Clinton was after that. But what really changed the tide in Louisiana was the election of Barack Obama in 2008. That's when you've seen a precipitous change. We had two Democratic senators, governor, a majority in a legislature, both houses, I want to say up until like around 2014. No, sorry, not 2014. A little bit before that, but things quickly changed after that. And now there's a supermajority in both the House and the Senate, and the governor's Republican, and both of our senators are Republican. So I would say things started to change a long time ago, but we fully turned into a red state in Louisiana. And even if you go back to the pre-Lyndon Johnson comment, we were still blue dog Democrats, which is a very different kind of Democrat than a Democrat you might find in Massachusetts or New York or something like that. And so when it comes to a lot of the social issues, Louisiana has always been conservative. We're, one of the most Catholic states per capita in the country. So as soon as the Democratic Party became, I wouldn't say hostile towards blue dogs, but there was more fundamental differences in between the at-large party and the blue dog Democrats. You start to see a lot of them change their voter registration from Democrat to Republican, or just simply vote Republican, and that's what changed the state overall.
So you are now in finance, focused on the national security sector. I am struck by the intersection between defense and politics, and not necessarily in a good way. When we talk about national security innovation, this seems to be firmly in the domain of conservative and Republican circles. How do we fix that? And how do we make this national security innovation community more bipartisan?
That's a great question. I'm actually not sure why the perception of the armed forces is so conservative. If you actually look at a lot of different metrics that kind of do proxy tracking of how active service members vote, it's almost 50-50. And in some years, the active service members have been more Democratic than Republican. So I'm not sure why. I have some theories. I think one of which is our Republican colleagues are much better at embracing the flag and embracing the armed service and embracing law enforcement and entities like that. So I think they kind of co-opted, and everybody just simply says, oh, well, if they like them, then they clearly must be Republican. but I think that's also a big mistake. I mean, you can look in the people in the House like Seth Moulton, and there's a bunch of Democratic um, um, politicians, and you can understand that there's a lot more nuance there. When it comes to national security and national defense writ large, when you get outside of the veteran community and you get into the vendor space and all that other stuff, I think it would be a huge mistake for us to just forfeit that, like, the embracing of patriotism and the flag, to say, oh, that's a conservative space, we don't need to be there. I think we need to insert ourselves everywhere, especially when the goal of what we do at Prospect Park is to make sure that we have the healthiest defense base possible, and we are keeping the country safe at the end of the day. Democrats are patriotic. We do want the country to be safe. We do believe in public safety and national security. So I think it's way more of a perception, and I think it's a perception that, for the sake of the well-being of the Democratic Party, we need to push back against, and we need to get into this space.
So I'm sure you're following the events around ICE in Minnesota and of course here in Chicago. Behind some of ICE's activity is software enabling identification of potential undocumented immigrants that they're looking to seize, provided by Palantir. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, what do you think? I mean, what do you say to communities that uh, are drawing a line connecting what we're seeing in the streets of Minneapolis and Chicago and other cities with regard to ICE and the national security community that fairly or unfairly is connected to those activities?
Yeah, I would say to those members in the community that would conflate national security with those type of tactics is, we should 100% look deeper. Just because you subscribe to one thing does not mean you subscribe to another. There's also legal guardrails that we should be adhering to, and they are very much on those guardrails of the Fourth Amendment. There's a lot of potential privacy violations in the software that they're using and things of that nature. So we need a very healthy judicial system to be able to keep those things in check and keep our civil liberties in check. And we, at Prospect Park, and, I would say probably most Democrats doing national security work are going to stay away from that and make sure that we deploy responsible technologies. And hopefully that's a differentiator when looking into the community, to where you don't just blanket and say, oh, everybody's conservative or everybody has animus towards, my municipality, my state. There's a way to responsibly deploy technologies to keep us safe without sacrificing civil liberties. And you're right. Some examples you've gave, people have overstepped. So you need responsible people here to responsibly deploy those technologies. And as long as you dominate it, too much of anything is going to be bad. As long as you dominate it with people who, don't have as much respect or reverence for the Fourth Amendment, who aren't listening to citizens, then you are going to have these moments of, overreach.
So tell me about Prospect Park. What made you decide to move into this sector after your time leading Shreveport, Louisiana?
Yeah, it's a great story, actually. So I was not planning on being in finance at all, but I was at U Chicago. I was teaching a government and technology class as a Pritzker Fellow at the IOP. And I went to a lunch, and a series of events happened, and I ended up meeting the founders of Prospect Park, Eric Reeves and Matthew Kirst, and they knew about my background, and they said, hey, we're starting a new merchant bank here in Chicago. We'd love if you could help lead our P3 practice. And, I was like, okay, what does that entail? So we talked through it, and I kind of naturally fit their aims and objectives as far as what they wanted to do with at the municipal level, state level, federal level. I don't have any state experience in my resume as a principal there, but I had to obviously deal with the state a lot when I was in local government. So it kind of just like naturally fit. I had a very good network to lean on, and they were very patient with me without a finance background to get up to speed and get our practice up to speed. And a very collaborative shop. Some of the things that you talked about as far as national security, they gave a Democrat a chance to run the shop as well. So that was awesome. And we've built something really, really strong, and it's only the beginning. Like, what we're going to do there is going to be phenomenal. And at the end of the day, I think it'll make our country safer. I think it'll make our communities healthier, and I'm very happy to be a part of it. And I hope more veterans look to be a part of our financial community.
Absolutely. So, what types of defense tech companies or technologies are you most focused on right now, and what problem sets with the U.S. military intelligence community do you think are most underserved by existing solutions?
Yeah, so we're currently raising and deploying capital for debt capital, senior secured debt capital for national security vendors around the 14 critical areas that the Office of Strategic Capital have identified. But I'll give you some examples. We're looking at some microchip tamper-proof packaging investments and some vendors that are doing that. We're looking at a lot of drone companies right now. Obviously, that's really big when you look at what's going on in the Ukraine-Russian war. So those 14 areas is primarily what we're focusing on, but our origination, we get, a lot of things coming from everywhere. And what we really want to focus on are companies that have received SBIR grants, received some equity, so somewhat mature companies that need debt capital. There's a million different options when it comes to equity and dilutive capital in this space, but not much when it comes to debt to let those founders keep a lot of their equity at the end of the day. And that's that niche area that we're stepping into.
Very good. So, last question. A lot of value creation in the national security sector happens in the superstar cities. Your San Francisco, Austin, Texas, Boston, and so forth. What should cities that have largely been excluded from the agglomeration of value creation that we've observed in the superstar cities the last 10, 15, 20 years be thinking of as this national security sector continues to grow with elevated defense budgets?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm going to use Chicago as an example. Chicago has clearly embraced me with open arms, but a city like Chicago that doesn't typically come up in those conversations has a huge advantage. It just needs leaders to really focus in on the area, and that huge advantage is manufacturing. Chicago and other areas in the Midwest and even the Rust Belt are really known for people that put their hands on the problem and build things and make things. Our current administration, that is an emphasis of theirs because we've exported those capabilities and capacities to other countries. So it is a prime time for cities like Chicago to really get in the game and make a name for themselves. You have the capital centers, you have the innovative centers, but who's going to put this stuff together? Who's going to be the ones to really, get their hands dirty? And there's a little bit more technology these days. Maybe they're typing on systems a little bit more, but the Midwest, we know how to make things. So I think it's a prime time for cities like Chicago, Cleveland, you name it in the Midwest to really get involved in the national security space. And it's going to take everybody. We're clearly not in a world war situation, but if you think of all the kinetic areas and fights that are going around the world, we need to see national mobilization similar to what we saw in the world wars. We don't want to be caught behind the eight ball when we do have these engagements. And God forbid, but we need to be prepared either way. Being prepared, being at Porcupine is a great way to deter, attacks on our country and again, keep us safe. And that should be our goal at the end of the day.
Mayor Perkins, thank you so much.
No, of course. Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.